Okay. Uh, Hello everyone, and welcome to the live stream today. Today I'm gonna be talking a little bit about pleasure and displeasure, and how Martinez uses these two concepts together as and he calls it the highest fire. The highest fire. So, and that is basically the hunger and the satiation principle. So before we get a little more into that, let's just look a little bit about look a little bit the overall functioning of the spiral cycle. Like if we see this symbol here, where we have the spiral cycle with the 6 colors going counterclockwise. So infinitely counterclockwise, this spiral cycle is the moving forward of evolution. And what drives evolution is what we're going to talk about today. What drives evolution is this principle of the highest fire. And that principle is the continual longing and satisfaction of experience of life. And if we imagine if we could take an x-ray of this symbol, then we would end up with this symbol here, which is basically the same one, but we just see a little more detail, and we can see out in the ring that there's a combination of darkness with a little bit of light here in the animal kingdom. And then as we go on into the divine world up here, we see there's a combination of light with a little bit of darkness in it. So, and that keeps shifting back and forth, alternating between the darkness culminating in animal kingdom and the light culminating in the divine world. So that is the infinite breaths of the universe, continual motion of the waves coming into matter from the spiritual world and out of matter back into the spiritual realms. And to explain that in a little more detail, if we look at this symbol here, we see again the darkness culminating here by the point here, combination of darkness as before in the animal kingdom, where the orange is culminating, the killing principle, explosion energy, war, and so forth. And then we have a tapering off of the darkness, and we have the combination of light in the divine world where the blue is culminating. Intuition energy is culminating here. And then it continues on in that cycle, yeah. What is interesting is this principle of hunger and satiation. So, for example, just to explain it very practically, if we're hungry for something and we know we have our favorite food, our favorite dish, and when we get our favorite dish and then we love it and we get this pleasure out of eating it, and then the next day we get our favorite dish again and we get pleasure out of eating it, and then the next day we get our favorite dish and then we get pleasure out of eating it. But as we continue to only get our favorite dish, it's gonna cease being our favorite dish. So this is the principle of hunger and satiation, that we get satiated or satisfied with this dish and then we want something new. We're longing for something else, and that's the the basic drive of the evolution, and that's what Martinus calls the highest fire. The highest fire is basically that longing to experience something that gives us pleasure and enjoyment, or doing something that fills us with enthusiasm. So if we look at these colors here, and we see how there is a light circle and a dark circle. So that means if we are here in the animal kingdom, or well, let's start with a plant. A plant, or a mineral, even we can start with a mineral. The mineral is a being in the kingdom of bliss, is longing to enter the world of form, the world of matter. So that is what the being in the bliss kingdom is longing for. That's its pleasure. So that is satiated with the spiritual realm and longing for the matter. So as this being in the kingdom of bliss starts to incarnate in the kingdom of the plants, the plant kingdom, we see that that is the light for them. That's why it's a white circle here. But then after millions of years of being in the animal kingdom, the beings in the animal kingdom becomes satisfied or satiated with the animal kingdom and the instinct energy. So that means that this sun is the dark. That means it's repellent to them now. It's not attractive to be in the plant kingdom anymore. So they're longing for the animal kingdom. So the animal kingdom becomes the light for them. That's what they're longing for. So then it slowly, after millions of years, they start incarnating in the animal kingdom. And when they have culminated in the animal kingdom, been there for hundreds of millions of years, that becomes no longer the light, but then the real human kingdom becomes the light. And that's what they're hungry for. So then this exchange continues throughout the realms. So that's how this symbol is read. Of course, there's a lot more to this symbol, and excuse me, trying to get this thing to work there. The structure of eternal life. So, but that's basically how this hunger and satiation principle works to drive evolution through these hundreds of millions of years, through the evolutionary spiral cycles infinitely, onwards and upwards in evolution. It's the principle of hunger and satiation. So, and just so I don't forget, this all symbols are copied out of Martinus Institute. So if we look at this principle of hunger and satiation, which is the highest fire, that's what Martinus calls the highest fire, because it gives us this feeling of bliss. Every time we satiate something we're hungry for, we get this state of bliss, and which is Martinus' term for the highest fire. This state of bliss, when after we have reached the satisfaction of something that we have been longing for, we experience peace, right? And satisfaction gives us a peace, and it is also love. So if we read a little bit about what Martinus writes about it in the volume 4 of the Book of Life, in the Third Testament here, section 1578, he writes that through the principle of hunger and satiation produced by the highest fire, the living being, as previously mentioned, experiences life. Through hunger for a thing, the thing becomes attractive and is perceived as pleasant. And through the satisfaction or satiation of this hunger, the thing becomes repellent and is perceived as unpleasant. In this way, it is possible for the being to experience light, paradise, or the kingdom of heaven as something pleasant, and the darkness in the world as something unpleasant. Just as it is equally possible, through the same principle, for the being to experience the same kingdom of heaven as something unpleasant, and darkness as something pleasant. And since the highest fire, or the sexual principle, transforms the senses of the individual, it desires or hungers for darkness only to subsequently desire light. Let me read that again. And since the highest fire, or the sexual principle, transforms the senses of the individual, it desires or hungers for darkness only to subsequently desire light. So this is the alternating thing I talked about with the two white and the gray circles. Yeah? And as it becomes satiated with the light, it hungers for or desires darkness again, and so on continuously. And in this way, eternal life in the form of the spiral cycle is an eternal, perpetual experience of the satisfaction of the eyes or living being's desires, wishes, and longings. And by allowing this satisfaction to manifest itself as satiation, which thus in turn is the same as repulsion, the individual can liberate itself from the thing that it has become satiated with, and which it therefore no longer desires. And through this sexual structure, and thanks to the highest fire, eternal life is thus a perpetual revelation of the fact that everything is very good. The universe is love, or an eternal indication of light in the darkness. But light in the darkness is initiation. Initiation is the experience of God's image. God's image is the highest knowledge, ability, and bliss. So, that's where we experience that's why we experience this going forward in evolution, always experiencing something new that we're longing for and hungry after as the meaning of life. If we don't experience this satiation of our longing, we cannot go forward in evolution, and we feel depressed. So we need that renewal of a life experience continually, otherwise we don't feel like we're living. And that's why some people may ask, but why, we're in the light, why do we long for the darkness? We don't understand that. Well, no, because where you're at in evolution is over here, where you have just had the satisfaction of living through the darkness. So now the darkness is, you're repelled by the darkness. So the driving force forward for you is the light. So of course you cannot understand that if you have just eaten your favorite dish for millions of years, why would you ever eat your favorite dish again? But you have to remember that through this process of going forward, this in evolution with hundreds of millions of years being over here in the light, your favorite dish, the light, you have been eating of that for 3 life zones, so maybe billions of years. So you're totally satiated with that now. So now your favorite dish becomes the darkness because you've been satiated with the light, and that's what drives you into the renewal of your consciousness. So, and you long for the incarnation into matter again, and that's we have to have that perspective that we have been so many eons of time in the light that we're longing for the contrast to the light, and that is the darkness. But you can see here there is a little bit of light in the darkness. It's not all dark. You see there's that little light is not all died out, the light. And then over here in the light there's a little bit of darkness too. So we have these latent stages of the light and the darkness. So basically that's all I kind of wanted to talk about today. So the hunger and satiation, that principle that drives evolution, and what Martinez calls this a driving force in life, namely the highest fire. So, and you can read more about this in the volume 4 of the Third Testament, and the section I read was like, I believe it was section 1578. And okay, so see you next time, and you're welcome to email with questions and or chat in with questions during the talks, and see you soon.